Welcome to Newsroom, brought to you by Insurance Brokers Alliance. Well, as per usual, we'll be talking about events from far and wide, local and international, from the perspective of our panel tonight. Anna Stevens, local lawyer.
How are you?
Welcome back to the panel, Anna.
Thanks.
Always nice to have you here.
Thanks.
And you'll recognise Tom Conroy, broadcaster.
I hope so.
Well, he's got an opinion to say. An opinion there, something
Evening, Bill.
And the first thing I'd like you to talk about, Tom, very sad actually in Sydney. We've been following it on the news, crisis situation with hostages, and in the end, you know, there was gunshots heard, police went in, and tragic death of 2 or 3 people there. From a media point of view, how do you think this looked? How much influence did the media actually have in the end?
Well, it's a bit of a... it's hard to describe what situation they're put into. They have to cover it, and there was blanket coverage. You flicked over to channels in the world, BBC, Sky, TV1, TV3, all had concurrent coverage. And it was minute by minute. They were on the doorstep. And that's the reason he took that place, it appears, because it was opposite Channel 7 or Channel 10 or whichever one it was. And because of the exposure, you're actually fuelling the fire by giving them the coverage that they seek.
Because he was demanding publicity, wasn't he?
Well, and he picked his spot beautifully in terms of here I am, film me, and it was from the moment he walked in to the moment he was carried out. It was war, you know, it was ball by ball coverage, if you like. What was good from my point of view is the way that Tony Abbott came out and said immediately, he said, there is a situation here, but get on with your lives, because that's what they want you to do. They want you to be scared and stop and be transfixed by the situation. I'm paraphrasing. He said, just get on with your lives, because we're not letting them win like that. So sort of balancing it out a little bit. But you've always got that question, if they knew they were not going to get that expansive television coverage, would they even done it? And because his history suggests that he was a publicity seeker with outlandish behaviour, and now the questions, of course, arising about whether he should have got bail for his crime. So it's easy in retrospect, of course, to ask these questions, but they have to be asked.
Absolutely. Anna, do you think that the guy, surely he wasn't a full quid, he must have been ill?
Oh, clearly not. He was clearly disarranged, but it's interesting. I was listening to an article from one of the negotiators based in New Zealand this morning, and he was saying that actually that media coverage from their point of view is advantageous as well. They want to be seen to be in the media so that the hostage taker can see that they know what's going on, and that's a mechanism at times for feeding information back to him strategically. So that was interesting to hear that from that technical point of view, the media are sometimes seen as an important link from the negotiation point of view. But you've got to feel for those negotiators that spent, 17 hours in contact or if not in contact, planning how to go in and how to resolve the situation, and then to have it end in the way that it ended. Your heart's got to go to those guys.
And there was responsibility shown by some aspects of the media when they made the radio stations. They wouldn't play out the demands, and that's a selection that the person would have made on the spot. We're not doing that. We're not fueling that part of it. That was good to see, and some responsible activity on social media. And it was interesting to see the tweeting system work to good effect, where the police were able to keep people informed reasonably. They obviously weren't going to disclose too many details about what was happening. There's a siege, the street's closed, go home, don't go home. And that was, they can instantly do with a second without interrupting the flow of the play. And so I respected that. What was interesting too was the big question: why didn't they shoot when they had a shot? And that's being debated today. There was a shot, and because you see the movies and you saw the TV programs, it's always the turning point of a movie, isn't it? In a hostage situation, he's lined up, do you shoot? But it's interesting to look at the counter argument to say, well, it was a bank, perhaps the plate windows would have interfered with the shot anyway. That's just one theory. Another one was, if there was a second person with him they didn't know about, it may have interacted. He may have been wired up so that when he was shot, he could, his muscles.
There was talk of a backpack, wasn't there?
There was all sorts of reasons why they didn't. But to the general public who watches Hollywood, thinks, oh, that's sniper's got a shot, why didn't he shoot?
And that's a problem, isn't it? Because the Hollywood scenario is just simply never the real scenario. It's kind of made to fit. It works out, and basically the real scenario is inevitably a lot more horrible, a lot more tricky, and
Snap poll. How much of it did you actually watch on TV? How often did you tune in, if at all?
I actually work. 8 till.
It went on for 16 hours.
Not a lot, actually, to be honest.
What about Bill?
No.
What about you?
No, I didn't. I read it I read a lot of stuff online, and I looked at the video clips online on the Herald, actually.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. Because I'd be interested to see, whether people are now sort of used to that sort of thing. Oh, well, I'll catch up with it later. Whereas, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, live coverage of an event unfolding, which is common now. The chase of O.J. Simpson, for instance, people tuned in to see, to see that in the millions. But do they do that these days? Do they think, oh, it's there, I'll check
Well,
it
the
out
last
later?
big one I watched would have been 9/11.
No, but we're talking that's a scale of
that's
massive
huge. I mean, that's the
proportions.
last one I've glued to the
Yeah.
set.
But there have been many since then.
Yeah.
There's been
Yeah.
a lot of coverage of events since then that, that I'm not saying we're blasé about it, but maybe we're not as transfixed as
But
we
you
would have
do
been.
get blasé, don't you? Because, I mean, the media is so immediate now, and there's so much of it, there's so much access to it. I mean, if you wanted to, you could literally walk along the road, as we've seen in some of the advertisements, with your smartphone watching it, where it was never like that before. And as you quite rightly pointed out, Tom, there's been several of these incidents since 9/11, and I think people can't help but get blasé.
And I tell you, the best coverage is BBC.
Absolutely.
And they're on the other side of the world. I was watching their coverage because what they did, and they've got the resources to do it, is they got snapshots from all different media covering it. They looked at the Australian version, they looked at their own version, and just picked the best bits, rather than what the Australians and New Zealand tend to do, say the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. Because the police weren't going to tell you what's going on because they didn't want him to find out. So all we heard was expert after expert saying it might be this, it might be terrorism, it might not be Islamic, it might be that, we don't know about their flag, and then an hour later, same stuff,
Basically expanding from the very small amount of information they had and extrapolating the scenarios, which actually I don't think is always helpful in those situations, is it?
No, I don't think so either. And they sort of hypothesise best and worst case scenarios. And some of those worst case scenarios weren't even close to what was going on. And that then inflames the situation, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does,
Puts greater fear around
It certainly does.
And the people it affects are those who may know people in the cafe, because you probably would by then. By the time that coverage unfolds, you're starting to, and then you're hearing all these theories about terrible things that could happen. And something did terrible happen. I mean, but the damage was, I suppose, limited. It could have been a lot worse, and we have to look at it like that.
And one of the theories, of course, was that was potentially a sideshow to a bigger event that was going to occur.
Okay.
And so you go from
He was saying that,
a
wasn't he?
small incident
There's
into
bombs everywhere. So he's obviously trying to dramatise the thing, be the centre of attention, etc., etc.
And of course, they can't ignore it. They can't just say, okay, he's just kidding about it. We've got to go and look. We've got to shut this into the Opera House. We've got to think. So they sort of win in a way. And what will happen over years is that people will think, oh, not another threat, not bother, and one day something will go wrong. But
And we have seen that too. We have seen that in the past. I think some pretty big tragedies. And of course, that's not the finish of tragedies. 141 children killed in Pakistan. What is in the minds of these
must
people?
be one of the most abhorrent acts outside of a world war that you could do. To walk into a school with a machine gun and wire yourself with bombs and shoot the kids and blow yourself up with absolutely no respect for your human life. To punish the parents, that was the plan, because these were children of military people, because the Pakistan military are trying to subdue them. To carry an act like that, you're on a par with Hitler and
well, it
Genghis
is
Khan
an
and all
act
those.
of a most atrocious form of war, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, with no remorse. So how do you ever turn people around like that? But then again, Germany 50 years ago were doing exactly that, and now they're mates, so it's possible, but it's a bigger move.
They are instilled with beliefs somehow, brainwashed. There's no question about it. A human being doesn't do that kind of thing unless they are.
If you look at the David Cameron response, because they've played all the responses all over the world, his was the best. He said there can't be any, and I don't know the exact wording, any belief system in the world that can justify that kind of thing. I don't care who you worship. This is just beyond the pale. And it was very succinctly put. Whether it makes a difference or not, we hope so. But it's tough. I mean, that's why we don't play cricket in Pakistan, because you just can't go. I mean, they haven't been going there for years, and this is the reason, because it's just a continuous thing over the last 2 decades where they're constantly fighting these groups.
It seems like there's no moral, ethical, or humanitarian
Well, you can't bargain with them.
boundaries. There's none.
And they don't care about their own life, so what do you threaten them with?
That's right.
That's the tough bit, eh? What do you do?
It was very
I don't know what the solution is.
Right. It was very interesting to listen on national radio, and it wasn't this year, it was another year, to an interview with he was a bomber, a guy who was a bomber, but had been caught by the British police. I think I mentioned on Newsroom once before, a long time ago, and jailed. And then whilst in jail, he came face to face with what he believed and why he believed it. and became quite outspoken about the fact that he said, I was brainwashed. And he said, and those who did the brainwashing have their kids in the best British and American universities. I was the age of their children. That's where they were. They weren't wired up with bombs. And so we've got something incredibly sinister here.
And the guy in Sydney,
Yeah.
but he was an asylum seeker. Australia had actually opened the doors to this guy
Right.
and let him in to protect him. And that's the response, isn't it? So you think you're doing someone a favour, and then if they turn people away at the door, they seem to,
Still wrong.
you know, that's still wrong. So how do you win in that situation?
Right.
But I mean, the guy was up for attempted murder on his wife, or some sort
Murder
of
and
connection.
sexual offending?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with a history of offences, so that is a serious question, how that guy's roaming the streets. And he wasn't on the watch list.
Yeah.
That was the other thing. Not on the watch list. Who is?
Yeah.
Goodness me.
You know, so
And from a legal point of view, I don't know what you can say here, knowing probably not a lot about the case, but is it usual for people to get let off on bail, these kind of people? And what is the situation whereby they get away from the court, they're allowed to walk away from the court without being remanded in custody?
Yeah, I mean, I don't practice in criminal law, but they've proven to the court that they're not a risk to society, or that their risk to society can be managed by particular bail conditions. And of course, we've had our own offences caused in New Zealand where people have been on bail and have reoffended. And you know, unfortunately, with the prevalence of drugs and other sort of mind-altering substances, I think that can really influence your ability to predict whether someone may offend while they're on bail, because if they're under the influence of drugs, they actually aren't conscious of their actions. And so I guess past behaviour is the best indicator of future behaviour, isn't it? Maybe we should be taking a firmer line on when people should be retained in custody as opposed to being let at large on bail. But you know, certainly I imagine, as New Zealand has had to do, Australia will be looking at their rules around bail and who's allowed bail, whether there's stronger conditions, reporting conditions that need to be put in place.
I think the delicacy that they're dealing with is if they're seen to put everyone on a watch list that looks like they might be Islamic because
You
of the
start
address,
looking at
then
religious
people say,
stuff,
oh well,
yeah.
it's, you know, you're just picking on us because but that guy had more than that going for him. I mean, he sent those vile letters to the soldiers and to the Prime Minister and the Queen. Anyone writing letters like that, there's something not right with you. So they should have rung a few bells, I think.
Surely you have to err on the side of safety.
Public safety,
Yeah.
I would have thought.
I would have imagined, and I guess everybody's going to make a mistake, and those who let them out are going to be saying, well, we made a mistake, and it will lead to changes. Whilst we're still talking about these issues, which are not particularly pleasant, but however...
We will get to some pleasant
We
things
will
later,
get to
I
some
promise.
pleasant issues, because it's the last show of the year, and we're determined to, and there's a lot of good things been going on, actually. What kind of person, like New Zealand and Australia now, are looking at those who would wish to go and fight for ISIS, for example, it's a similar kind of thing, and saying, we're not letting you out of the country. What is the mindset of a person who says, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to fight for this cause, if there is a cause? These seem to be like normal Australian, New Zealand citizens, perhaps, in some respects, but what makes them want to go over there and pick up a gun and, well, basically kill people?
Well, the Australian guy that they picked up, the young guy they used an example, thick as a plank, you know, he's obviously easily influenced, had no idea what he was doing. Right. So I think the brainwashing, it took place there. But what happens is if you don't let them go and you keep them in your own country, then they start festering and forming. If you let them go, you go to a place where you might be able to shoot them, because you're in a mass group. Yeah? So how do you make that choice? And I mean, look at that. I mean, we're talking about people in their formative years. They're influenced by a lot of things, aren't they? Their peers and what they read, and you know, they're a bit depressed about things, so they're looking for another out, something to, you know, a release. And they're easily led. But I mean, how do you make the choice on a case-by-case basis? It's not easy.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the modern situation we find ourselves in, and things have moved fast. I mean, we weren't even looking at this 5 years ago. We weren't even thinking about it. We weren't even thinking about discussing things like surveillance of citizens and whatnot. It just, I think, in retrospect, if we look back, we see that there's been some incredibly rapid changes. I guess it's come with communication, I don't know. as you said, Tom, and the availability of material, which will educate these people in a different sort of way. Whereas when I was a lad, we could just pick up a book. We're going to find it in there. No.
The other thing in the first part of last century, though, were two massive world wars where we slaughtered each other over a piece of ground about a mile wide.
And didn't know why.
So I think we've still made some progress. There
Yeah.
are some
Oh, that is
isolated
true.
problems around the world, but on that mass
Yes.
slaughtering for no reason other than egos in many cases.
Well, particularly the First World War. Yeah.
Both.
Yeah.
You know, it was just people wanted to rule the world.
And I guess that's what it boils down to now, is it's people still wanting to take power.
That's right.
Isn't
They
it?
do.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, right. Whilst I was mentioning ISIS, we've got a few minutes left in this section. The Ukraine. Things seem a bit flexible in the Ukraine. Angela Merkel has come out now and said that basically Putin is putting pressure on those former Soviet states because they've been leaning towards EU. Is this to the EU? Is this just a reflection of the man wanting power? I mean, that's what it looks like to me. He's an old KGB agent and can't stand the fact that Russia has now had those states torn away from it and are leaning towards the West. So he's beginning to put the acid on. So Angela Merkel said that very recently, actually. She's come out and made a public statement, so she must be fairly considered about it. What do you think?
Yes. What do you think?
Yes.
Summed up beautifully, Bill.
wants
What is
power.
amazing is how it sort of drifts into the background now. We've often talked about on news how fickle news is. It's 1 minute we're talking about nothing else but Ukraine, and it's one of the big hits of the year and everything. Next minute,
And I'm going to read something to you.
But it's still going on for the people who live there.
The thing which stops it isn't always guns. I'm going to read something to you from Market Watch, which says, in Washington, Vladimir Putin has little choice but to withdraw from the eastern Ukraine in order to stem the financial crisis that is spinning out of control in his country. At the end of the day, money talks, doesn't it?
Could be his distraction though, if he's fussing around with politics. People have got their eye off the board and not looking at their rather forlorn financial position.
Yeah, which
Could be
apparently...
distraction, clever distraction.
Yeah,
Keeps them
exactly.
in power.
Yeah.
Same reason, still wants to be in charge.
Yes, exactly.
Anyone who went from being the president, the prime minister, and back to the president is very clever.
Well, that's somewhat unusual thought. We're going to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be back with some more uplifting topics.
Wouldn't be difficult.
No. Welcome back to Newsroom. Right. Now, we're just sort of lifting our gaze a wee bit. Before we get to it, we're going to talk about Ebola. Tom, you got something to say about that?
Well, it's on the list of top things
It certainly is.
Googled this year, and understandably it's been in the news all the time, but here's a couple of interesting facts. How many people have died this year, over Ebola so far? Do you know what the number is, just off the top of your head?
Right now, I don't know. But it's between 1,500 and 2,000.
No, it's nearly 10,000.
Oh, nearly 10,000. Okay, right.
How many people will die of malaria in this year in the world? Roughly,
I would
on average.
I would imagine there'd be between 100,000 and 500,000.
Do you have a guess?
I was going 100.
Yeah, I'm going 500,000. I reckon it's between 400,000 and 700,000.
Yeah.
So the question is, why aren't we equally active about seeking ways of preventing that? It's wiping out whole
It is.
villages. But why is it that we I know Ebola could spread and it's a viral thing and it could blow into something else, and it's entirely understandable why they are controlling it. I've got no problems. But what I'm questioning is that we still have diseases in the world that are prevalent and because they're destroying African people.
It's the fear that we might not be able to stop it and it might get amongst us.
But
that's what it is.
But malaria's got a cure. It's called quinine.
Yeah.
That's why we don't fear it, because if it gets amongst us,
But
we'll
why
take
have
the
we
drugs.
got mass UN people dressed in appropriate bright clothing, going through these villages, giving them quinine and whatever this, I don't know if that's the exact cure, but something like that. Why haven't we got a mass campaign to wipe that out? Because we've done it with measles and smallpox.
You won't wipe out malaria, but
You could have a go at it.
you can have a go. What you can do is you can protect people from it. It's unlike polio or smallpox. Malaria has got more than one host, like the mosquito is the host, whereas the host for smallpox and was just the human host. So once you eliminated that in people, then it wasn't going to be spread. And
So while there is mosquitoes in the world, there's going to be malaria, is that what we're saying?
the interesting thing is that about malaria, that following the Second World War, and maybe during that time, the USA actually, when they were occupying some of the islands and around that area, sprayed a lot of the swamps around there with a mixture of DDT and diesel. And they reckon that, I know we say that DDT is a terrible chemical, it's never been shown to actually poison anybody, it just doesn't break down the environment, and it's even in the Antarctica and the penguins' blood now. But it was thought to have saved 500 million lives when it was actually being used. So exactly the point that you're saying, that we don't.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
We didn't
one of those useless pieces of information that I know. But you're quite right, Tom. You're quite right that we don't tackle this problem as a Western society because it's not affecting us. Whereas I think there's a real fear that Ebola could get amongst us.
And that's it.
It's
It's self-preservation, isn't it?
about-
It's nothing to do with saving the world.
Yeah.
It's about saving yourself.
Yeah.
Correct.
No such thing as true altruism.
Yeah.
And all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There is not. Actually.
Anyway, it's got to be
We're
some
gonna-
more jolly
Anna-
things
Anna,
on
it's
this.
over to
one.
Anna.
Anna, find
Some
something
lists.
happy to talk about.
She's sweet.
But
Anna's
nobody's
got the
died.
lists.
Let's talk about Kiwis performing outstandingly on the international
Cool.
stage.
I like that.
Because we do bat above our weight,
Well,
don't
so-
we, internationally?
Who's the most
really.
outstanding one for you this year?
Ooh. Well, Lord, of course, has had phenomenal attention.
Yes.
Phenomenal attention. But more recently, you've had Peter Jackson
Yes.
internationally.
Tell the viewers what he did, just in case they
Peter
don't know.
Jackson's been given a star on Hollywood Boulevard, Hollywood Lane,
Whatever it's called.
whatever it is, with
Well,
all the
next
other.
to Bill Cosby.
Well, you'd sort of want to be down a
not-
wee bit
you're
further
kidding,
from
sure.
there at the
Yeah,
moment,
cheers.
wouldn't you?
Well, it's
They
on
took him out,
Cosby,
put
he's
him
got
in.
it.
Yeah, his has been covered over for the short term.
It is.
For his contribution to international film. And of course, there's been a huge industry in New Zealand develop around the work that he primarily sort of instigated, really, didn't he? With Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit.
I was surprised to read that the amount of industry that had been created in terms of dollars, it was hundreds of millions, because when the government was giving them tax breaks, and I thought, oh, right, yeah, they'll be fly-by-night, gone in a puff of smoke. Well, when they actually added it up, I had to admit I was wrong.
It's huge.
They did actually produce a massive amount of overseas exchange, whatever, just money brought into the country.
And you even look at recently, we hosted the Lord of the Rings Hobbit fans, and the hype around that for them was phenomenal. That was it 5 or 7 days in New Zealand, and they did the tour, and
Walk through a paddock that was...
that was, we just walked through and think,
farm
oh, well.
paddock, yeah. But the other thing is
Phenomenal
contribution to some other smaller projects we don't hear about is the museum, the Aircraft Museum in Blenheim, which is absolutely fantastic. If you get a chance to see that, it's marvellous. The restoration of the Roxy Cinema in Miramar, and that's a wonderful place to see a movie. And now he's done the Bats Theatre.
Right.
I don't know what his level of contribution is, but he's had an influence and saved some things which would have been closed and condemned. So those sort of things are going on. I know he's got the money too, and it's easy when you're filthy rich and you can do those things.
But a lot of
But you
people
don't
don't
have
But
the
he's
money.
doing it.
And he's
He
doing
is
them.
doing it.
A
Absolutely.
lot of people don't do it.
No, that's exactly right. And every time I go to Wellington, I just see something he's done. I thought, well, he's putting it back. And in many ways, the embassy was restored in order to play the first Lord of the Rings. So all those things have come off the back of it that don't get the Star of Fame in Hollywood. And one thing about that, they don't give those away to non-Americans. There's a lot of Americans on that list. I'll be looking at that thinking, oh yeah. But to get it from an outside person, I don't think any other New Zealander's got one. I'd say at this stage he might be the only one.
And this guy's not finished. I mean, he's not
Not
finished.
far from it.
We just wait to see the next thing he'll turn up with. He's got imagination. I think the projects that you've been talking about, they reflect his imagination. He's not just sitting at home thinking of Peter Jackson, how am I going to make my next big film? His mind's obviously somewhere else. He's thinking about home and what he can actually do.
And he's got the backers now.
He has,
People are going to know that he's a box office.
Yes.
Yeah. He's
And
reliable,
they
isn't
can't
he?
Cash
mess,
cow.
they can't mess with him.
For now,
which
it
is
won't
good.
last forever, but whilst he's enjoying it, he's...
Yeah.
those are massive films, whether you like The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings or not, it's a taste thing, but you can't deny the impact it's had on the world of entertainment.
Absolutely. I mean, whether we like it or not, it doesn't really matter, does it? It's
And what does matter to us, if you look at those lists, is how many entertainment type things people look at, how it's important. Robin Williams at the top of the
Yes, that's right.
world thing. He's an actor.
Yeah.
Why is he the most Googled thing in the world?
because he was amazingly talented.
Well, yes and no, and
Yeah.
not everyone was a huge fan. It was a bit much of a muchness with me for him. He's still a good actor and he does some good movies, but to be top of the list of people's interest and the entire things that have happened this year, Robin Williams was it.
Yeah.
And the world one had him at 1 and New Zealand had him at 2. So
Consistent, aren't we?
why are we interested that much? I mean, it's sad, and I mean,
Yeah.
But, wow.
I suppose it highlights that facade too, doesn't it? That, you know, what you see is quite different to what goes on behind the scenes for both for one individual and also, you know, for a number of other
Lord
facets.
made a big impact, didn't she, Anna? I mean, really,
huge.
17-year-old girl.
That's just phenomenal.
I mean, you know, 17-year-old girl. When I just think of the 17-year-old girls I teach, and I think of one of and the way she's actually handled it, I think is a credit to the girl.
Absolutely.
And I think mothers there, family, and is very, very important in a situation like that. Keep alongside them.
One great singer said to me once, though, who said, it's not the singer, it's the song. And in this case, she had a great song which appealed across the world. You know, it's a sort of pop song which is dressed up to be something else, but it was a hit worldwide, and she followed it up with her personality, being a little bit different, looking a little bit different, coming out with some similar
So what
music.
you're saying is, without the song, actually,
Oh,
it wouldn't have happened.
No, but you needed that breakthrough. You needed the song. And there's lots of great singers around the world who've actually got better voices, probably. I don't know. She's got a good voice. I'm not saying she hasn't. But right place, right time, right song. And she contributed it. She co-wrote it. So her effort was great. But then for her to follow at her age, with good appearances and always conducting herself well and and appealing and I mean, I don't know how long it will last, because when she's 25 she's not going to look like that, she, or 35.
Oh,
so
no, she might.
the look is going to change. Will she maintain the appeal?
I mean, look at Cher, Tom.
Yeah, that's right. Which bits of her? The bits they made or the bits she was born with?
Probably not much of the original
No,
left.
I don't think there's a lot of original left. But extremely talented. And
Absolutely.
how did she get started? Hit songs with her husband.
Yeah.
And then built the rest of the career.
Right.
As I say, this year. So she got the breakthrough, and what you do after that is what determines your success.
Exactly.
But the way Lord started was interesting too, wasn't it? Because it was a free download, which was new, sort of, in the industry at the time.
Yeah.
Which I think kind of it shows that creativity and initiative and from
How do
from
we get
her.
out there?
Yeah, let's do something.
Freeze
Yeah.
always the
But
best.
she backed
Certainly.
herself, didn't she?
She backed
No,
herself.
she
It's
backed
certainly the way now on YouTube. There is, I mean,
But if it had been an awful song, it wouldn't matter if it was free or not.
That's
It
true.
must have still been a
Exactly.
good song. For some people, you know, well, I wouldn't rush out and buy it, but if it's on, I don't turn it off.
there is. I mean, YouTube in itself is absolutely phenomenal. Now, I just went back and looked at that thing, Gangnam Style, again the other day. For some reason, I don't know why.
Bill, we've
I
done
promise
that.
you,
That was
I
on
didn't-
Newsroom 3 years ago.
I know, but I promise you I didn't go looking for it. It popped up, and I was interested to see that it now has had billions of views.
Oh yeah, it had a billion in the
Billions.
first before it even moved.
And
but it was a catchy tune.
And
It
15
was,
years ago, you had the Macarena though, so
Yeah,
it was
we did,
nothing
yeah.
new.
Yeah,
you know, and you
yeah.
didn't
That was
have,
one of the early
you
ones to
didn't
go
have internet.
viral, wasn't it? Because it was
Yeah.
only just starting then.
you didn't have internet to the same extent.
Nothing is like it.
that you have now.
No.
What's next on the list, Anna? What else have we got
Well,
there?
What else have we got?
The World Cup was
Oh.
obviously huge, but
Yes.
I mean that's huge whether there's internet or not. It's,
Absolutely.
because of the size of the you know, the
Was it
sport.
the biggest sporting event?
Oh, well, it was this year
Worldwide
in terms
it
of
is.
following it. It is because it goes Olympics and then World Cup, and then Rugby World Cup. I think is about third these days in terms of number of countries watching everything. So they're all big events, and you know it was a great standard. There's lots of goals scored, even though we weren't there, which is a bit of a shame. But it was still Brazil lost, all those things that that sort of attracted people's attention.
Keep the competition
And Brazil, of
alive.
course, could never host a World Cup, so they told us, and it was one of the most successful ever.
Yeah.
Now we'll roll around the Olympics for their next
Particularly
one.
seeing the amount of rundown they got, the amount of
Oh,
negative
yeah,
press
they couldn't build
beforehand.
this and they couldn't do that, and they think
It wasn't
everyone had
gonna
a
happen.
fantastic time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Nobody got hurt. Well, a few people got mugged, but they do every day.
You're going to get that anywhere, aren't
In
you?
Auckland or Invercargill, you don't have to wait to go to the World Cup for that. So
I don't think they understood the way Brazilians operate. They just don't get themselves uptight
Yeah.
about 3 months beforehand and just get themselves in a complete
Yeah.
twist. They knew they could do it,
Yeah.
and they were not going to develop stomach ulcers, either nationally or individually.
From afar, you'd never know anything. It may not have run perfectly smoothly, but as far as we were concerned, it was. All the games seemed to have been played.
Yeah.
They all played in big houses.
Packed
and
out
we all
crowds,
watched it.
which is a
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
thing,
Right,
really,
yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's good to see that the top searches there, or the top things, are actually not disasters. You know,
Is it fair
they're not.
sprinkling?
There are some in there, but it's not. You know,
We should read
not
out
too
the
bad.
top 10.
Read the top 10 to
Read
us.
the top 10
It
for New
depends on them
Zealand
in
Google
category.
searches. You can do that.
New Zealand Google searches at 1 was FIFA World Cup,
Yep.
2 Robin Williams,
That's positive. Yeah.
3 Commonwealth Games.
That's unique to us, not on the world list.
Okay,
So this is New Zealand.
New Zealand, we're doing New Zealand. Right.
Malaysia Airlines, which
Understandable.
Understandable.
2 instances.
Yep.
Exactly.
iPhone 6,
No, that's a bit of a
That's
surprise. I mean, why would
I
that?
would not have put that there.
they have a following, don't they?
They do, but to make it the
That
top
does.
5, that's huge.
Well, people will be wondering when it's going
Launch
to come out.
dates, what
Yeah,
features
launch,
does it
that's right,
have,
yeah.
why is it different
I'd say
from
that
the
would have peaked at one
5
stage and gone.
and gone, yeah. Jennifer Lawrence, Charlotte Dawson, that was
Yeah,
another
and the
tragedy,
tragedy story.
unfortunately.
Flappy Bird. What's Flappy Bird?
Oh,
Sorry
Flappy
to jump
Bird.
in. What is it?
Flappy Bird is a app. It was a free download app,
Right.
which was a little bird, cartoon bird that you had to navigate your way around. And it was the fastest growing free app download. It became an automatic download on the phone as you bought
Okay.
it.
Right.
The developer ended up withdrawing it because he felt guilty. He actually had a social conscience
Right.
about its level of addictiveness. And so you just had people who completely incapacitated
Did he
because
make
they
a
needed
Flappy
to
Bird?
they needed to get to the next level
Did
of
he
Flappy
make
Bird.
money? It's a bit like
Well, it was a
Tetris and all
free
those other
download.
You
early
clearly don't
games.
have an
you
iPhone.
know.
Do you have an iPhone?
No, I've got a Samsung.
Maybe-
So,
maybe-
but
oh,
I've got
maybe-
Same
I've got
concept.
Samsung.
Yeah.
But it's different. We're on the other side.
I don't know that you
We're
are.
the good guys.
I don't know that
We're
you
the
are,
good
to be
guys.
honest.
We're on the good guys. the
What are
Samsung
you
people.
sporting?
What's that?
iPhone or
No, neither.
Brick?
No.
Nokia brick?
What are you? You and I?
I'm an I.
Nokia
I'm an I.
brick, definitely.
Yeah,
I was getting
no,
a bit of ribbing about
I'm
it,
an
but-
I. I think Flappy Bird was again just that power of social media and how it can just swarm.
And he
just
withdrew it.
create, and he withdrew it.
Wonder if
Did he make money in
Oh,
it?
that's what my question
How
was. He
did-
making
I would
money out of
say,
it?
I don't know, but I would say they make money out of the
He probably made
advertising,
enough.
Right,
don't
that
they? And
is
the
attached
following.
to it.
Well, I have a
Yeah.
social conscience. When it's made 2 million, I'll withdraw it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd
I
love
don't
to be
actually
able
have
to,
to
I tell you what, one skill if I start in education, I'd love to be able to know how to make an app.
Yeah.
Because there are thousands, millions of ideas for app making.
Huge amount of work goes into it.
But
Huge amount of development.
if we knew how to do it, that's what I'd be doing now.
Not
if I
too
was
late.
sort of
But you
clean.
could, Tom. You've just got to think of an
I've
idea.
got some other things to
right.
do. No, I don't know how to
True.
make it though.
You don't have to make it.
But-
Someone can make it for
yeah,
you.
No, yeah.
Yeah, the idea
don't have to pay
actually,
them.
Sign
the
them in,
idea is
protect the
more
IP.
important than the actual
It is.
construction of the app itself,
Yeah.
depending on what software you're using to make
Yeah.
it. So, definitely.
It's like anything. Sometimes you're best to have the idea but outsource the
You can
technicality.
be
Otherwise,
highly
you get
skilled
so
and sit there staring at a wall for 6 months and produce nothing because you've got no ideas.
Mm.
Or you can have lots of ideas and give them to 2 or 3 app makers. And
Because
I see where you're coming from.
There's so much variety and opportunities out there for doing things. If you just see how they've progressed so quickly in the last 10 years,
Yeah, I know.
there's an app for just about everything. You think so,
Yeah.
but there's still a lot of
I was-
unapped.
Yeah.
I've no
New
doubt.
word there.
I know
Yeah.
doubt not very many of the viewers will be interested. So I'm going to say it anyway. I was watching Top Gear last night. I don't know how old the episode was, but they were travelling on a train, and Richard Hammond or James May pulls out their iPhone. He says, "Actually, at the moment, the train is going, and is able to say what speed it was going just from his phone, and obviously from satellites and whatnot." But I mean, that in itself, I thought that's pretty amazing. We
How
couldn't
do
do
you
that a few
check
years ago.
That we always take it for granted that it's right, though, don't we?
We do.
And we look at that and say, well, who says so? It could be an app that just says when you turn the thing on and connect it with the train, it just guesses. I mean, there's no way of double checking.
Well, I
is
don't
there?
think it had anything to
Calibrator
do with
with
the
you.
train, to be quite honest. I think it was just GPS. The GPS was working off GPS, yeah.
But there's just so many things when we're doing research for University Challenge on questions, because there are so many sources of information these days
yes.
that are conflicting,
Yes.
and things are changing. Like every 5 minutes, something's right, something's wrong, something's moved on, something's changed, and where's it all come from? How's it been verified? How come there is 3 things that say that and 3 things that say that? And
Exactly.
has this mistake been duplicated because people have cut and paste, or has this fact
I
been changed?
actually
I don't
believe-
know. I mean, it's great to have all that information,
Yeah.
but there's just this element of having to, how do you question it beyond doubt? It's hard.
I think actually this is going to have to become an essential part of the education system because you're asking that question. You are saying, there's conflicting information here because it's in your lifetime, Tom, it's come to you, and you too, Anna.
Yeah.
And only just because you're younger.
Yeah, correct.
But but in actual fact, tomorrow's students are going to have to be told how to discern what is right and what is wrong from the internet. Whereas before, if you went to Britannica or the Oxford English Dictionary. You put it down, so that's what the Oxford English Dictionary says. There is not going to be someone come along and argue with the meaning of that word. You just open it and say,
They've
it's the
analysed the
Oxford.
6 sources.
Correct,
Before they
but
put it
they
there.
still make the odd mistake, as I found in the rest. They make the occasional mistake. Far fewer than perhaps the mass Wikipedia type things,
Yes.
which is a great, as I say to people, it's a great place to start. But what you've got to be very careful of is that people can go and then change things to suit them or to suit an argument. I've found 2 or 3 things about things we've done that completely, somebody just made it up.
Really?
It's not entirely not right, but it's in there, and if you looked it up, people, well, it says this on it. Well, where they got that information from?
Yeah.
It didn't come from us.
And
Nobody asked
clearly,
me.
clearly, if that's right, clearly, if anybody would know, you would.
Well,
There's
that's
no
right.
dispute.
That's how it became about. I saw something about it was on Tim. There's a big page on Tim, and it's saying that his record was broken by these. That never happened. It never happened. They put it out there that they were doing it, and it was never verified. Things were changed,
Okay.
but somebody just said no, broken by, and named the person on the date. Well, I'm sorry, that was not right.
His record still stands. then.
Isn't it? Our record still stands.
Our record still stands.
But that was just typical of the, it's just one thing that immediately just leapt off the page. Well,
Yeah.
who wrote that?
Yes.
And where did it come from?
Yeah.
So you got a question.
We can certainly put that right tonight, that Tim Shadbolt's record for, it was the world's longest interview
Correct.
with Tom Conroy, still stands.
Correct.
Now, before we finish this session, I want to talk about that.
I want to do it.
Well, go on
Can I
then.
do that?
Yeah,
There's a
yeah,
list
rip into
here I
it.
need to read out.
Okay, right.
It was the
didn't get past number 4.
how to searches.
Minutes.
So this is searching
Okay.
things about how to learn. Okay, the
Right.
first one was draw, which is, everyone
That's-
learned to draw.
Yeah, good.
The second one was meditate. Does that mean we're all stressed
Yep.
but we all want to find a ways of meditate? That was an interesting
That was
one.
number 2.
And the third one, I'm sure you've done this, crochet.
It's in vogue.
Have you
Crochet's
done
in
crochet?
Oh,
vogue.
we're being sexist here.
Yeah,
Crochet's back.
I should have said, Bill, how much
Thank you,
have you learned how to
Thank you,
crochet?
Tom.
Screenshot was next, which I assume is how to
That's on your
cut
smartphone.
page at
Yep.
the moment.
Oh,
We
maybe
already noted that.
on your
How to
PC.
screen-
How to kiss, number 5.
Oh, dear, oh, dear.
Not a
dear,
good
oh,
reflection
dear.
on society.
No,
Having
well,
to look
it's-
that up on the net.
So
Could be
far
worse.
too much
It's
internet.
probably they've cut out a few, I think,
Could be
perhaps.
worse.
Right, yeah.
How to pronounce? Well, that's a good one. Good
Yeah.
to hear that. I tell you what, there's some very good services on the net to get pronunciations of words, which again, in that challenge.
Particularly
thing.
for other languages. You know.
And you get it in the language of the person with the right dialect. So not only do you get the pronunciation, you get it with the right
You don't get the
intonation.
Americanised
You don't
version
get
or the-
this is how you say pasta.
Oh,
You know,
right.
they've got the
Well, it's how
Italian
the
guy
Australians
saying it,
say it,
and it's
mate.
quite good, or whatever it was.
There's probably an app for that too, Tom.
There is. How to sing, I think that's probably always there. How to twerk.
Of course.
A twerk.
Yeah.
So you got a person who's twerking while they're crocheting. Is that possible?
That's going to get hard.
It is.
Yeah.
And how to knit. And how about this one? How to dream. How does that work? How do you tell people how to dream? Isn't that something that just happens?
Well, you could look at it
I
in
don't
your
know.
sleep.
I thought it was interesting. And whilst we laugh about it, people are every minute of the day looking this sort of thing up.
Yeah.
And it makes you ask the question, why? Why would you want to do that?
Interesting.
Some of them quite obvious, how to draw. Everyone would like to be able to
I
draw
have
and sing.
to
and
But in
say-
the past, you might go to a club to learn those things. You
How
might
to
have
dream.
joined
Is it a dream
maybe
club?
not dreaming.
Okay.
You might be a dream
That's
catchers or something.
true.
But you might have gone and looked for
So maybe
a
it's
group
antisocial.
or a something. Whereas
Kiss
now,
club?
well, that
I think you're probably talking more about the drawing, colouring, and
crochet.
might be more fun going to a kiss club than just looking it up on YouTube.
correct.
But your other things, you might go to a craft club, and if you're looking it up at home on YouTube or on the internet, you're not interacting and socialising as much. Hey,
Interesting. That's dead
Living in
right.
isolation a little bit more because we.
Yeah.
Or is it isolation, or are you actually being exposed to a lot more people by being on the net?
But is that really
at a
exposure?
superficial level, maybe.
A starter. It's a
Or
starter.
do you just learn the basics of crocheting so that then you go to your group?
Well, that's it. How
don't
to
look like a fool.
crochet. And it might just say.
So you don't
go to a
embarrass
club and
yourself
learn.
when you get
Yeah.
there. How interesting.
Crochet.
How very interesting.
Crochet knitting. Good to see coming back in fashion.
It is actually. So the other thing, along with cupcakes.
Oh, now
Oh,
that's
they'll phase
oh
it.
great. That's great. That took a while
Cupcakes.
to
I
come
couldn't
back.
believe it. The kids are making cupcakes.
We had all those muffins for years
I
and
know,
years and years
exactly.
and years.
Yep.
And then we had the resurgence of the cupcake.
I couldn't believe it. I
Much
thought it had
nicer.
gone out. I thought it's gone in the ark and it will never come back. And they started bringing these things
Butter
in.
and they've got cream. cupcakes.
Incredibly bad for you, and I love them.
Well, they're not because they're smaller. Muffins are big.
Well, not if you eat
muffins,
6 of them,
cupcakes,
Tom.
Yeah, and they're power packed.
That's
Right,
right.
with a
yeah.
cupcake.
They're power
They're
pack.
little patty pans. They're little. Yes.
I'm going to wait for my thing until our next session. So stay
Okay.
with us because it's quite good. And we'll be back and we'll have some topics of interest maybe. Stick with us. Welcome back to Newsroom. Right. A lot of problems in the United States, of course, people marching in the streets, massive protest, outcry really against the fact that, first of all, there was the shooting of the young fellow, and then we saw Eric Garner strangled in New York by a cop, and this is, I mean, both cases went before the grand jury. They decided not to indict. You know, the saying always was in the United States, they would, legally they would indict a ham sandwich, but it seems like that doesn't happen anymore. So things haven't been looking good over there, and you think, coming up to Christmas, it's just not a good feeling at all. And then we read this wonderful story of in Alabama of a woman who was caught shoplifting 2 or 3 eggs, which actually subsequently broke in her pocket. And so the shopkeepers, the store owners, called the police, and the policeman who came recognised this lady. He'd been to the house, he knew the poverty that they lived in. And so he said, wait there, went back, negotiated with the store, came out and said, they're not going to prosecute you, stay right there by the car. And he came back out and he said, here's a dozen eggs, take it home, feed the kids. And the response to it in the country, throughout the country, has been overwhelming. In fact, then he went back to the station and he said, look, this family is in a crisis situation. They've got he went around to the house, they've got no food, and we need to do something about it. So they had a whip around. Then he went down the next day with some enormous quantity of food, and the thing has just gone viral, as we say. And I think basically the trucks are delivering the food. It's going to start. Obviously, that family won't use it all themselves. It'll just start something totally new. And it just, to me, it just seemed that the country in the USA, and perhaps we're all just ready to hear something like this, Anna. We just don't want to hear any more stuff like the other stuff, because there's thousands of police in the United States and everywhere, and of course the media focuses on the one thing that goes wrong. Well, you can understand it.
Only in America would something go this big too, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Get this much traction. But it highlights that real concern, and I don't think that New Zealand's immune from it. We've got people who can't afford to eat, and they can't afford to pay the power and meet those basic necessities. And up to Christmas, it's not the happy time that it is for us, which is really sad, I think. And so the generosity that's been shown here is fantastic, isn't it? But I suppose it's about moderating it, isn't it? Because it's all very well that they've been given this phenomenal amount of food now. Well, it's got to carry on. Because what's going to happen? As long as they can pay the power and they've got the freezer, they might be all right until January. But they've got to be able to sustain it. They've got to get up next year and find that they're not in the same position.
People seem to want to do something.
Well, it was good that it got so much traction, and I think it got traction because of those other incidents. Yeah. People purposely thought, let's give this some mileage. I'm not sure it would have done had it been just I'm sure those sort of gestures happen quite regularly, where people, rather than arresting them, they sort of work through the situation and put it into perspective and say, look, this isn't, let's just find a solution here. But this one, I think, because they thought, right, let's give this the same profile. And it did take off, to the credit of the people who are watching, because it could have been ignored and off the page the next day. So it's hard work to get good news in the news. There's a lot. I often quote, from my position, I see All Blacks and top footballers, and if they have a couple of drinks or do something, take a stupid picture, it's all over the page. But I see them do lots of good things. Give away their clothes to fans and spend time with them and do, go to hospital.
It's not news though.
People stuff, and they never, you never get mass reporters going down to watch them do that kind of thing. Nobody's interested. But the moment you miss a plane, or you take your photo, although that was a pretty big incident, especially when you're taking photos of yourself and putting them on the net, which is really dumb. However, it should be offset by those good stories where they do make some kid's day, which I think is always an unfair balance, even in the media. But you can't force people to be interested.
No.
But there's a responsibility of the media, I think, of putting those sort of things out occasionally and just saying, hey, the world's not all an evil place.
And it must be difficult to be in law enforcement when those other stories are out there, because it was sheeted home to me again just yesterday at home here. We cruised up Herbert Street and were stopped by the police for a breath alcohol check, and I thought these obviously a family man policeman who stopped us, and I said, I'm glad you're here. you know, and he's the kind of guy, just speaking to him, an absolutely normal guy, like 99.99% of all police. But sometimes these guys, and it was, you know, just great to have a little chat there for a minute, these guys have to bear all this other bad news, you know, and sort of must feel a bit awkward about it sometimes. So, and yet it's the same ones who we read in the news quite often put their lives on the line frequently to save other people. You know.
Did he get you off the charge?
What's that?
By being nice, did he get you off the charge?
I was perfectly
You don't
sober,
drink
Tom.
anyway, Bill, so I think you're
Well, a little now and again, yeah.
yeah, but it's quite safely. But
Yeah. So, you know, I think it's a really good time of the year. We remember these guys.
yeah, and they work in a very tough environment.
Yeah.
It's, you know, you got to understand that. So yeah, good bit of sympathy.
Absolutely.
And so often they are that first frontier, aren't they? They're that contact, that interaction that breaks that cycle.
There's people
and
you
says-
call when you need some help.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
just remember
Exactly.
that. you know.
Remember the Fire Brigade
Yeah,
or whoever else.
exactly. All those guys
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
girls.
Yeah.
Do that.
So 2014 is just about at an end. And so what has been the most significant things, do you think? We've had an election, of course. We seem to be over it now,
Most
don't
young
we?
people forget about things that happened at the beginning of the year.
Ah,
You know, we think
okay.
about election things, but I was looking through the Googles and there was nothing about Kate and Will's visit to New Zealand.
Oh,
And then I had to think, was that this year or last?
It was.
But it was this year,
And given
wasn't
that
it?
they're in America now,
And
You'd
it's
think
big.
it might have linked
Yeah,
back.
and it was a big event for New Zealand. That those sorts of things, I think, perhaps overshadowed by others. But I thought, man,
is it because it was in the media and the news so much that people didn't have to Google
and
it?
that's what I was going to say. They
Maybe.
had all the
Yeah.
information before you, didn't they?
Maybe
There was
that's
I
a
mean,
good
it was-
point, Bill. Very
There
incisive.
you go. Yeah.
Very incisive.
But it certainly was. I mean, whilst they were in the country, if you turned on the 6 o'clock news or the 5:30 in the case of QTV, there it was right at the start. So there was lots of info, and people really enjoyed the visit, didn't
Yeah,
they?
and I think
I mean,
I'm trying to think good news stories, and
Yeah.
it was a good news story because wherever they go, they seem to get it right.
and surely that's one of the strengths of the royal family. That's a good news story which will always make the headlines because, I mean, even doesn't.
Especially if she keeps having kids.
How much are
Exactly.
they controlling that though? How much are they ensuring that that's the image that's portrayed?
You're
In terms of
suggesting
what's-
they do control it, don't
Yeah,
you?
yeah,
Yes,
sorry,
and I
they could-
agree.
yeah, yeah.
And I agree. It is
Yeah.
not just an accident.
I don't think
Yeah.
You truck
yeah.
out your best looking people,
No.
Well-
you know, with their cutest baby.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
good on them for making the effort. People
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
But
Even the
and-
non-Commonwealth countries. I mean, they're very popular in the US.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know
Absolutely.
people say it can't be hard work, but actually all that travel and being nice to people all the time when you don't want to be,
Yeah.
you know, there's an effort and there's a lot of pressure and expectation on what you should do and how you should look. And how would you like if every time you walked out, someone analysed every item of clothing
Oh,
you
absolutely.
had?
Yep.
You've got no privacy, so there is a downside. I know it's nice being the Queen or the King or whatever, but it hasn't always been historically, of course. But
They're at official engagements in an official capacity, aren't they? So they can't sort of just be that person in the room that just
That's right.
stands there. They've actually got to be.
They have very little personal freedom.
no, I think
I
you're
think-
right. I think more than they used to because they've made an effort to be normal people. You know, when
And
they
we
were
do,
Following
growing up.
we do
Diana, there's been a
accept that
huge
more now,
surge on
don't we?
that,
I mean,
hasn't
particularly following Diana, we do accept that. In fact, we want them to do that. But no, that was certainly a big story and a positive one.
It was a positive one,
Yeah.
and you know it's easy to get distracted by the tragedy. But every year there's going to be tragedy somewhere because that's just human nature, sadly.
the nature of
But
it.
there's always good stories to counter it. It's just finding them and making sure you remember them.
Exactly. And know which year they were in.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's amazing. That was the first thing I thought of.
what was
It
it?
goes so
Last
quickly. I
year.
mean,
It does.
It becomes
Merged,
blends
don't
from
they?
one to
They
the other.
merged
Yeah,
into-
It's blends
Yeah.
Was
from
that
one
was
to
that the biggest thing? That, you know, do you think that was probably the most significant thing the year for you, Anna?
It's really
Well, it
hard
was
to-
significant, but I don't know. It's sort of hard to.
Yeah.
I mean, dare I say it, the election did consume a fair portion of the year.
It did.
Because there's a build
It was
up.
hijacked.
Yeah.
.com hijacked it, and
Yeah,
I think
I agree.
it, you know,
It became a circus because it looked
wasn't
like
what
at
it
one
should be.
point we're going to get a whole lot of mad people who should never be given any power at all. We're going to get some. Fortunately, we all saw sense at the last minute and voted for the right combination or close to the right combination.
I see. Isn't .com now trying to start a party in America?
I don't
I'm
know.
sure
No,
he's-
he's lately taken up with
having another
trying
go
to regain access to 60 million New Zealand dollars, which he's his Hong Kong investments.
Yeah.
In a way, I feel like they should be given back to him because he can't pay his legal bills. Well, everybody needs to pay their legal bills, otherwise it won't get justice. But Yeah.
We should go back to our list.
Go on
We're
then.
gonna see-
We've got a few
we've got
minutes,
time
Tom.
because we want to see what the top keywords were that we
Right.
searched, what we were interested, because we talked about elections, we talked about
That's right.
the Royals.
What else on
Lord
there?
was first, we
Yeah,
we
okay.
mentioned her, and that was easier because the publicity got. But there's that counters your argument. She
No, does
got
it?
every bit of media attention.
did too.
And she was
And she
Googled.
was searched.
And she was
Yeah, there was
Googled.
Googled. Aaron Smith, selfie in the nude for the All Black,
golly.
that was always going to be.
Yeah, right.
Rachel Smalley was an interesting one
Yes.
because she hasn't been on the TV for 12 months because she left TV3
Yep.
and become radio and
Yep.
a little bit on the Herald. So maybe they missed her. She is. She's a good reporter and attractive, and I suppose the combination of things.
Yeah.
Lisa Lewis. Now I have to admit, I didn't know who she was, but when you Google her, you find out why people did.
I don't know who
You
she is. Oh, right.
Yeah, she didn't wear many clothes. So.
That's an out of 10.
Mark Hunt is a martial arts
Okay.
exponent. He's at 5. Are we mixed martial arts? Is it that big these days?
It must be.
Yeah. And we don't know what numbers these are. Joseph Parker, of course, is a New Zealand boxing. Well, he's on his way to significant achievement. Benzie Marshall, because he failed. The interest would
Well,
be
Benzie,
because he
yeah.
failed as a blues
Yeah,
player. So
yeah.
it's interesting to see the mentality. Chris Cairns
Right.
failed.
Yeah, well, he is. Exactly.
Sorry, allegedly.
Allegedly, yes.
So, but again, bad news item where it wasn't because of his performance on the cricket. So Brendan McCullum should have been on there because he's broken all these records this year. 300 first,
Exactly.
win in the West Indies,
Yeah.
draw in Pakistan, and then 3 200s. He's not on the list, but Chris Cairns is. That's not right.
Strange.
That's not right.
Very strange.
Mona.com,
But not Kim.
but not Kim. Why would that be? Anna?
Well, who
Why
would you rather
that
look
be?
at, Tom?
Well, I suspect that those searches might be heavily weighted in favour of the male gender
You think
as
so?
opposed
Yeah,
to
it
the
is,
female
yeah.
gender.
Yes,
It
you
doesn't
think
say
so?
that on actually.
Well, you probably think that half of this list is for that reason.
I think so.
don't think it's
Yeah, I
because
think
of their intellectual good. And Stephen Donald.
Okay.
Because maybe they made the movie about the kick and about having
of
in a
course.
World Cup.
Yes.
Yeah,
Perhaps
yeah.
at the beginning of the year, people had forgotten who he was.
Yeah.
So they thought, well, why are we
What's
in
this guy? What's he
Stephen
doing?
McDonald? Because he only had 15 minutes of fame, of
Yeah.
course, which is
Yeah.
what's prescribed.
Yeah.
And so that's my idea. But although these are superficial in a way, they do indicate what our psyche's like, doesn't it?
And it's
what we do.
interesting, some of those admissions are interesting. Richie McCaw's doing, well, he's, amazing All Black, phenomenal captain. He's had some huge milestones, but
Oh, absolutely.
not there. And maybe that comes
Yeah.
back to the fact that
Yeah.
the media's reporting, so people
Do
just
I
need
need
to
a lot
of
look.
stuff
but-
in there, yeah.
I know as much as I need to about
Most
him,
people
so
are
therefore I
very
won't Google.
So we
open
don't look.
guy, and most
Yeah.
people could talk about Richie
Yeah.
McCaw, even if you're not a rugby fan,
Yeah.
you can talk about Richie McCaw.
Then you to go back in favour of your argument.
Yes, I
is
think it's
that
on.
if you think about what you Google, it is about things you don't know
Don't
anything
know.
about,
It is.
isn't it? It's
It
not
is.
things or you want to know more about something. But when you've got a mass information,
or look
you
at
don't
them.
need anything.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
look at them.
You look at them.
Exactly. Yes, if you just want to look.
We're out of time, but we've got time to say to you that it's been a great year for Newsroom, and thank you very much for watching us all year. We'll be back, and we need to say, what would you like to say to our viewers, Anna?
Just have a wonderful Christmas. Have a Merry Christmas. Enjoy time with your families. Enjoy having some slower pace, hopefully
Oh,
not
yes.
working
We like a bit of
to
that.
the same
yeah.
extent, and just enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the things.
And all I'm
Right
going
at
to
time.
say is, why in the top sports search is Arsenal at number 6, not Chelsea? That's what I want to know.
Tom-
That has to be resolved in the next 12 months.
Tom's going to have a terrible
That's mine.
Christmas. He's going to have a terrible. Do have a safe holidays, have a lovely time, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next year.